Is the United States heading into a recession? And if so, what does that mean for our hyper-local North Shore pump housing market? And also, what's the lowdown on the proposed data center just north of Wyndham? We're gonna cover all of that today in your October 2025 housing market update. What is going on, party people? My name is Chris Elliott, local realtor, Windham resident in Central Virginia. Been in the business since 2013, and since then have sold 550 homes in our greater Central Virginia area. In this video today, we're going to cover what's going on in the U.S. economy, specifically how that affects our North Shore pump housing market, and we're going to give you a breakdown of the proposed data center just north of Wyndham by HHHunt, and I'm going to give you my 2 cents as far as how I think that's going to affect local housing values. Let's get into it. Based on a recent Lending Tree poll, 2/3 of Americans believe that a recession is on the way for the United States economy. Current job growth is stalling out. Inflation remains stubbornly elevated above the Federal Reserve's target 2% inflation rate, with some experts saying the worst is yet to come with tariff-driven inflation. You might be saying to yourself, hey Chris, thanks for bumming me out with all of these factoids. What does that have to do with housing? Well, specifically, inflation and employment have a lot to do with housing because they are what drives the federal funding rate, which of course influences mortgage rates. And I'm going to break that down for you. All right, so the Federal Reserve is the government entity that controls the federal funding rate, which is the rate at which banks borrow money from each other, which doesn't directly control the retail mortgage rates that you and I see at our local bank or with our local mortgage professional, but of course it influences those rates. So when you hear people talk about the Fed cutting interest rates, specifically they're not cutting interest rates, they're cutting the federal funding rate, which of course influences interest rates. Okay, so now that we've covered that, I'll also cover that the Federal Reserve has a dual mandate from Congress to maximize employment, meaning they want as many people employed as possible. They also want to keep inflation at a reasonable level. The Federal Reserve target inflation rate is 2%, so they want to keep people employed, they want to keep prices steady. Congress believes that if the Federal Reserve can do those two things, they're going to keep the economy turning and prevent rioting in the streets. So this is a tough juggling act at any time, but specifically right now because we had a recent jobs report that came out that was absolutely terrible, indicating that, hey, it's time for the Fed to cut rates so that businesses can start borrowing again and deploying that money and hiring folks. But at the same time, at least at the time of this recording, year-over-year inflation is at 2.7%, so it's above that 2% inflation rate. And the Federal Reserve knows that when they start cutting interest rates and money is cheaper, that naturally prices start going up, so inflation becomes a problem again. All that being said, it's gotten to a point now where the Federal Reserve is basically forced to start cutting those interest rates and making gradual reductions in the federal funding rate, gradually reducing interest rates in the economy. With that being said, at the time of this recording, we've already seen where mortgage rates have come down in anticipation of these cuts. So interest rate, or mortgage rates rather, dropped from about 6.5% to the time of this recording, that's 6.27% for a 30-year par mortgage rate. All right, so now that I've completely nerded out, but now that we understand US economy to mortgage rates, how does that affect our actual local housing market? So let's take a snapshot of where we are currently. So currently right now in North Shore pumps, so Shore Pump North Abroad, we're seeing where the median sales price is actually down 4.3% year over year from where we were this time last year. That being said, our days on market is still only 11 days. Home sellers are still getting on average 99 to 100% of their asking price. So that number kind of fluctuates a little bit, but we've been there for a little bit now. And our month supply of inventory is still only 1.6 month supply of inventory. If you've been following my content, you know that month supply of inventory simply says at the rate at which homes are currently selling, how many months of inventory do we currently have on the market. Anything below 6 months is considered a seller's market. So at 1.6 month supply of inventory, we are still absolutely in a red hot seller's market in North Shore Pump. So here's my personal prediction. Here's where I call my shot, right? If and when we see rates get into the fives, so 5.9, as long as that interest rate has a 5 in front of it, I think the floodgates are going to open again, and there's going to be a psychological unlock. So I think we're going to start seeing home price appreciation again. I think we're going to see a lot of inventory unlocked and a lot of buyers come off the fence. I have talked to so many people, homeowners that want to sell, either they want to upsize, downsize, or just sell and move out of the area. Buyers that want to buy, that want to, downsize or upsize, that are just literally stuck because they're thinking interest rates are too high, or they currently have an interest rate in the 3s or the 4s, and they just feel like it would be financially a bad move to sell that and move into 6, 7, 8% interest rate. A lot of housing economists economists believe, and I also believe, that once we get into those fives, it's going to mentally click where folks are just going to say, you know what, we've waited long enough. This house doesn't work for us anymore. We need more space. We need less space, whatever it is. And we're just going to see a flurry of activity in the market. And honestly, I think we're probably going to get into the high fives at some point in 2026. So I think we're going to see more transactions, more sales in 2026. That's my personal prediction. I'm excited to see what actually comes of it. All right, so all that's great, but what does this all mean to you? So here's the advice that we're currently giving to our prospective sellers as well as our prospective buyers. For my sellers, number one, tick tock, time is ticking away on you. So if you're somebody that wants to sell your home before the end of the year, I would highly recommend that you get your home on the market sooner rather than later. What we know historically is there's still plenty of homes that sell in November, December, January, February. However, it is a slower market during those times. So we're encouraging our clients, hey, if we're gonna do this, let's get the home on the market in the month of October so we can list our home when there's more buyers out in the marketplace versus less. Secondly, pricing is critical this time of year. So if we get the price wrong when we list this time of year, we're either going to end up holding that house until the spring, or we're gonna be making a price reduction in a slower time of the year in November, December, January, February, which is not necessarily an ideal situation. So we don't have the margin of error that we do necessarily in the spring, where if we realize after a month or two that we've mispriced ourselves, that we could still reduce and be in a hot market. Pricing is absolutely critical this time of year that you get it right out of the gate. And then last but not least, I hate to break it to you, but it's not the market. So if you're somebody that's been on the market that's not seeing results, it's not the economy, it's not interest rates, it's not Jerome Powell's fault, it's not the president's fault, it's not any external force. You really got to take a hard look in the mirror and say, what is wrong about my property that's not getting it sold? It's either not being marketed well, it's either overpriced, or there's something about the house that needs to change. Sometimes it's a combination of 2 or 3 of those things. And if you need to know why your home isn't selling, shoot me a DM, reach out, call, text, email, and I can give you a free audit and tell you what we think needs to change in order to get your home sold. For my buyers, get in front of the inevitable appreciation. So like I said, if and when interest rates get down into the fives, my personal prediction, we're gonna see the market take off again. We're gonna see home prices starting to appreciate again. If you can find a home that works for you and your family, I would encourage you to buy it now and get in front of that price appreciation and build that equity as opposed to paying more for the same property down the road. Number two, realize that the spring means more competition. So I've had some conversations with some folks that say, hey Chris, we're gonna wait until the spring when there's more inventory on the market, more homes to choose from. And I completely agree with you. There are gonna be more homes to choose from. Typically there are. However, realize you're also gonna be competing for that same inventory with more buyers. There's typically more people out shopping for homes. So realize those supply and demand dynamics are going to exist in the spring. And then last but not least, don't confuse less competition with no competition. So as I mentioned, we're still seeing where on average home sellers are getting 99 to 100% their asking price, and on average homes are selling in 11 days. So realize that yes, we're probably gonna see less competition in the winter months. However, that doesn't mean that like you're gonna be the only buyer in town, right? We're still in a very desirable area, a very competitive market, and there's still gonna be competition out there. All right, so I applaud you for staying till the end, listening to my ramblings. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say the server farm in the woods. HHHunt, the original developer of Wyndham 40 years ago, has proposed a 10 building data center campus on 400 plus acres just north of Windham, and I mean just north of Windham. This comes after their failed attempt to build a residential community due to the legal battles with Henrico that ended in the Virginia Supreme Court in 2019. This site would include nearly 4 million square feet of technology facilities with its own water, waste management systems, and big power lines already in place. It would also include Hunting Hawk Golf Course, RIP Hunting Hawk, if this goes through. And neighbors are worried, will this hurt my home value is the question that I've received multiple times. Concerns about noise and visuals, concerns about traffic, and concerns about perception. Does living next to a tech park make the neighborhood less desirable? Let's jump into it. So from a market perspective, impact is honestly very hard to quantify until it's actually built. I will say though, historically, home values hinge more on schools, convenience, and the neighborhood appeal than what's across the tree line. Short term, expect buyers to ask questions if you're going to be putting your home on the market while this thing is being built, if it goes through, especially if they see the construction trucks. Honestly, I think the biggest threat to home values in the next couple of years is the traffic of construction trucks up and down Pouncey Track Road. We're currently seeing that affect the folks in Parkside Village, where I'm actually sitting right now with the Amazon warehouse and the other warehouse being built on Ashland Road. A lot of construction traffic, and that has made a couple buyers skittish on properties in Parkside Village. So I anticipate that can be a particular problem. Long-term might be a controversial opinion. I honestly don't think it's going to drastically affect Wyndham values long-term unless you're directly backing up to the project. So unless you're on the absolute north side of the neighborhood, you know, just given the potential noise levels, the potential sight lines, I think those folks may be affected, but I think it's unlikely to tank Wyndham values across the board. Keep in mind, buffers and natural separation are planned. The county process includes public hearings and input, so residents' voices will be part of the outcome. And remember, demand for Wyndham specifically and surrounding communities has always been strong. Buyers still want the schools, they want the amenities, they want the lifestyle, and they want the proximity to the highways and shore pump and all it has to offer. And keep in mind, we're already next to a huge rock quarry, and that historically has not been a factor driving people away from Wyndham. Well, guys, that was our October market update, a little bit longer than usual. Thanks for sticking around. If you have any questions, concerns we didn't address, shoot me a comment, shoot me a DM. If we can help you with your next purchase or sale, give me a call, give me a text, give me a DM. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you next month.